Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Social Innovation Summit breakout session on stakeholder engagement during a crisis and beyond. My name is Ken Biberaj. I'm a managing director at Savills, a leading tenant advisory commercial real estate firm, and couldn't be more excited by the dynamic panel that we have today. I'm going to go around and let everyone introduce themselves, and we'll start with the kickoff question. As way of some organization, we're going to spend the first 30 minutes in a kind of regular dialogue, and the second 30 minutes really having a Q&A with everyone here in the audience who's tuning in. You have a Q&A chat function on your screen, and feel free to submit questions throughout the course of the dialogue, and we'll try to weave them in. I'm going to ask all my panelists to unmute themselves, and I think we're going to start with Nichol. Please introduce yourselves, and really want to start with a kind of broad question. Just how are you feeling this week?
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Really happy to be here today. Thank you, Ken. My name is Nichol Whiteman, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation, and we are the official charity of the Los Angeles Dodgers, really focused on ensuring that everyone in Los Angeles has an opportunity to thrive regardless of their zip code. Hence that vision. This is obviously a very troubling time. I'm struggling this week is the honest answer. As the CEO, there is work that we are doing in communities on a very consistent basis, directly serving communities that are very troubled during this time because of everything that's going on. And I think even more specifically, as the mother of two Black sons, the wife of a Black husband, the daughter of a Black father, and the sister to two Black brothers, it's a trying time. I'm happy that the conversations are happening. And we have a long way to go,
Thanks, Nicole. Todd?
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay. My name is Todd Jacobson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Social Responsibility, and I lead our global social responsibility efforts and public engagement efforts at the NBA. I think Nicole said it best. It's been a week of incredible pain and confusion and frustration and anger. And I think we at the NBA and others are trying to listen and learn from each other, trying to be there and support one another during this time. At the same time, trying to think about what's next and how do we channel this, as we know as people in the space, to really try to take this energy and have action to really bring about real change. But right now, it's really about listening and learning, and we're doing the best we can to do that.
All right. Darnell?
Hi, good morning. My name is Darnell Strom. I am the head of culture and leadership at UTA, which is one of the leading sports, entertainment, and media agencies in the world. And my division specifically focuses on working with a range of culturally influential people, from traditional talent to thought leaders, and really working with them to help build out platforms to really kind of expand their message from content to connections to brands and events and experiential opportunities. I mean, this week has been, challenging. I think beyond this week, it's, these last few months have been extremely challenging. I think that, it's an interesting time to have a panel that has the word crisis in it, because, I think in many ways, we were already battling COVID-19 and the impact that that's had on the economy, on our particular industries, on our communities, and then what's going on in the country right now with all the racial unrest and social injustice. So especially too, if you are Black, you've been dealing with being in service jobs right now, so exposing yourself to a disease that is killing your community at a far higher rate than everyone else. So that is a major crisis in its own right. And then you're dealing with America's original sin, racism, which appears its ugly head at a time when we're already fighting a battle. So we're literally fighting a crisis within a crisis within a crisis, and it's a lot.
So I want to drill down into just how you think about engaging stakeholders, right? When this panel was put together, really the main, genesis and issue we were going to really focus on was the impact of COVID on communities across the country and around the world. And now we have a new crisis that we're dealing with right now on the streets in our cities. Nichol, how have you thought about, stakeholder engagement? Has it changed with what your kind of focus has been, in the initial response to this week, as an example? I mean, how has your kind of perspective on engagement changed?
I would venture to say it hasn't necessarily changed because our approach to stakeholder engagement is partnerships always. So I always sort of lead with this statement with my team and others that partnerships has been the secret sauce to our success. Partnerships have truly been the secret sauce to our success. And so in the time of crisis, I think that because we have built such significant partnerships, whether that be with our Dodger team sponsors or that be with local communities, local city officials, municipal agencies, local parks and schools and districts and folks who are truly helping the community on a regular and consistent basis, we draw from that. And so I think from a stakeholder perspective, what we've been able to do is pull those partners together, but also we've listened to the voice of the community. So immediately upon crisis, and there's not a whole lot of time, so I applaud my team for us being able to do this in a very short period of time, we issued 2 assessments. One was a grantee assessment because we do fund programs, and one was an actual community families assessment because we run programs. We're very unique in that respect, but hearing the voice immediately from people in terms of how have these crises impacted them and what are they looking for, and what would be priority in terms of ways that we could support has really helped to guide our actions and our messaging and our communication, both with our kids and families after we learned obviously of COVID-19 and more earlier this year, but also specifically speaking now, also it's the conversations that we're having that I think that are helping guide specifically how we respond.
So on the spectrum of engagement, when you're thinking about dealing with stakeholders, right, Todd, you focus on pushing and pulling communication, consulting, participating, but the real kind of tip of the spear to Nicole's point is really partnerships and developing a stronger bond with your stakeholders. How does the MBA think about this, domestically, but also internationally?
You know, during these times, it's, you know, and Darnell really touched on it, it's incredibly complex. There's a lot of personal emotion and feelings that go in here. It's a time when you really need to connect with everybody. And so it really starts with communication. You cannot communicate enough during times of crisis. Very often companies focus on making external statements. The first thing companies should always think about is focusing and looking inward and making sure that internally their stakeholders, their employees, and all are aligned and feeling supported and validated during this time with the resources and support they need. I think it really is incumbent on all of us to do that. We talk about values. We talk about creating that environment. And so communication of those values, communicating out, making sure people can share with you and feel empowered and safe to communicate back to you and you can listen and learn continues to be the most important thing, particularly as a global company when you're dealing with a lot of people that are in much different situations. Not everybody, depending on where you are in the world and dealing with COVID, is dealing with it in the same way. But we're all going through something. So the communication is really important. The open two-way dialogue is incredibly important. And then making sure that you're sharing these points out, that as you move forward, you continue to create those touch points and making sure that you don't lose sight of the fact that when you're making sure those points are made and you can share what your values are and you can share what your programming are, that you're consistently getting feedback so you can adjust, and during times of crisis, make sure you can mally it across the time.
Nice. Now, Darnell, you come from a pretty unique background, you know, having spent a lot of time in politics and philanthropy and now becoming an agent, right? Like this division that you now lead is a new division. I think it was created and you're the first person to have it. How do you take this background that you have to inform your work and kind of advice to clients today when dealing with a crisis like this?
It's a good question. So, you know, as an agent, you know, we're working with our clients to find business opportunities and help them, you know, make money and expand their platforms. And you know, and I spend a lot of time doing that and focusing on that. And, you know, I think what's unique about our division is that, you know, the types of clients that we represent and we look to represent, some of them are, you know, traditional talent, people that would come from, you know, entertainment, sports, music. But we've also kind of expanded that too, because we've noticed that the people who are really shaping and moving and influencing culture, you know, are coming from art, they're coming from fashion, they're coming from politics, they're coming from business and entrepreneurship, they're coming from the social good space. So who are those, you know, real transformative figures that we can represent, and then kind of surround them with, you know, some of the traditional media content ideas, whether that be books, whether that be TV, whether that be film, podcasts, et cetera? How do you give them a larger platform to be able to reach a larger group of people? And it's really been giving a voice in these areas to folks who haven't necessarily had access to it. And, I think the other piece of this, the way that my background has kind of informed what I do as an agent is, I think gone are the days. I think people understand that they have a responsibility to use their platform in a way that makes sense for their audiences. Oftentimes that's for good. Oftentimes when we're in the middle of the times that we're in now, they're looking for advice on how to engage in policy and politics, how to engage with the social issues that they care about. And so having that background, it gives me the ability to advise and inform them on those things, but also to working very closely with the UTA Foundation, and other groups internally within the company to make sure that we're providing those resources. And I think to Todd's point earlier, just the importance of communicating to the stakeholders, whether they be your clients, whether they be your employees in times like this, and also listening. Because we don't always get it. We are in unprecedented times. There is no playbook on how to navigate, all the racial injustice that's going on in the country at the time of a global pandemic. It's never happened before. So we're all kind of learning in real time. And, sometimes we might misstep, but we also have to be open to listening and adjusting when those times come.
So much of just engagement and building these partnerships relies on trust. And I just wanted to kind of tease out trust in general, right? So when we think about even responding to COVID, some of the challenges I think we dealt with domestically are a bit of an assault on trust in institutions we all rely on, whether it's science, whether it's government, whether it's the media. And now that's kind of exacerbated with trust in our law enforcement, local communities. How do you think, from your own perspective, with organizations you're running, Darnell, with the advice you were giving, how do you advise building trust and engagement? And then how are you seeing this kind of lack of trust in traditional institutions that we kind of need to rely on impacting a broader effort to kind of move forward on all these conversations we're trying to have? And just open to, whoever wants to jump in first.
If I can chime in, I feel like a lot of the challenges that everyone is facing right now with trust are obviously systematic, right? They are the fact that they have experienced or felt these feelings of lack of trust for years and years and years and years because institutions have not done things that have made people feel like they can trust or they can rely on them. I think that we have not necessarily looked at data. Something like COVID-19, we are looking at data, and most of us are saying at this point we can't look to certain leadership or maybe certain authoritative figures or people who believe they are authoritative figures because the data is the data. The numbers are the numbers when you're looking at a health pandemic. And I think that with a lot of the other issues and the challenges that the country faces right now, specifically around systemic racism, data is something that we have to lead with. And I think for us in our organization, and for me as a leader, that's been particularly important, right? We can listen to this person, we can listen to this authority, we can put this person as who we're going to, but sometimes the data is the data. The numbers are the numbers. If we had looked at the numbers and the disparities in so many of our vulnerable communities prior to COVID-19, we wouldn't be talking about and dealing with the lack of trust that we're talking about in terms of these communities what these communities are experiencing as a result of COVID-19 and a result of these issues around systematic racism. It is the data that I think we've been ignoring.
Interesting. Darnell, Todd, either of you want to?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think from a trust standpoint, it always starts with process, right? When you're communicating out with stakeholders, they want to understand your accountability. They want to understand being honest and being vulnerable about not having the answers, but making sure, again, coming back to communication, it's always going to start and end there, making sure that you have that two-way dialogue, that you can listen and learn, that you can continue to do those things, continues to be incredibly important to establishing trust. Trust comes over time for how you handle your process, right? The outcomes of what are happening right now are always going to be out of people's control, but the process at which you as an organization follow to do that will help you account for the things that you need to do and make sure that you take the right steps along the way to engage the folks. I mean, I think when you're talking about your stakeholders and your folks and your staff and everybody there, and then the larger community, there's so much pain and anger. And, you start with COVID and everything's interconnected here, right? Nichol made up a great point. When you look at the data, it completely over-indexed in African-American and Hispanic communities on every way. If in New York particularly, they released the data, it was like 21 out of the 22 zip codes over-indexed in marginalized communities. And you can't ignore that. And then you have, the recent tragedies with, social injustice, racial violence, police brutality, all there. And you can understand how it's all interconnected and it's systemic. And we all have to take an inward look to how we handle our process, how we go about making decisions. And that's not an easy thing to do. But that, when you're talking about something systemic that's really pervasive in everything of who we are individually and collectively as a society, it requires that deep inward look. And I think that's what companies need to continue to do in order to have those tough conversations. You can't shy away from this if you really want to bring about change. And that means being really honest with yourself.
Now, Darnell, before you dive in, just you advise a lot of interesting talent, right? From Stacey Abrams to Malala to Ariana Huffington. I feel like some of the folks in entertainment and pop culture started in a different position of having trust with their kind of audience, right? So how do you build on that? How do you leverage that capacity of storytelling in a time like this?
Yeah, no, it is, I think the one thing that we tell our clients is, you have to be who you are. You have to be authentic. And, in the moments that you stray from that is when you lose your credibility. And as we all know, we live in a time where you can get real-time feedback of what people think about you on social media and otherwise. So, and look, you've been seeing it a lot for folks who are now, all of a sudden social justice warriors and chiming in on all that they want to do and reposting everything. There are folks who are calling them to task about what their history has been. So, I think in order to build that trust, you have to have a track record of being honest and open with people. And, and I think folks are willing to, give you some leeway if you're open and you're honest with them and there's a real dialogue and communication back and forth. But, you have to prove, and stand up and make sure that, what you have stood for in the past has to align and for what you're doing moving forward. Talking about like institutions, we have the largest kind of news and broadcast representation business, and obviously the news media has been one of these institutions that in some ways purposely has been trying to be undermined, and and I think in other ways there are certain things that haven't been covered, that haven't been talked about, and people lost trust in that way. So what we tell our clients is, always be true to who you are, always be authentic to who you are. And the moment that you start to stray from that, you lose your credibility and you lose the connection to your audience. But, we get a chance to work with like some of the people that you named, and it's like, how do we build a platform for them to really reach as many people as possible, to engage them in that message? Because I honestly think that a major part of how you change culture, how you change society, how you change hearts and minds is through storytelling. I think storytelling has the ability to humanize, to make things relatable. I remember I did this presentation a few years ago about just how quickly the culture shifted and changed around the idea of same-sex marriage. And, there's all this data that shows how shows like Will and Grace and Ellen and other things, were able to actually fast track people's opinions on the topic, because there were so many groups of people who didn't necessarily have a connection to those, to gay people or that community, but then they found it through storytelling on TV, and it helped shifted them. So how do we provide some of the best thinkers, some of the best creative people? How do we make sure that the storytelling that's happening on TV is representative of the people who live in this country? So we're telling more stories of people of color, where they're seeing themselves on TV. And what's great is that the majority population of this country is also seeing those stories, and it's really hopefully moving us towards a place of reconciliation. But it's really one of the things that we're trying to drive home.
That's great. Now, when we think about the broader recovery, especially with sports and entertainment post-COVID, this is really a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like, I mean, when we're thinking about when people are going to be back at ballparks or back at, stadiums, or when production for movies and films and content is going to fully ramp up, how do you think about maintaining stakeholder engagement over a longer period of time, and what's happening kind of in your specific industry, what's happening in baseball, what's happening, in basketball, what's happening with production. Darnell, like, take us through this. Like, how do you maintain this over time, and what's specifically happening in your sector with your teams and your clients?
Ken, I'll just jump in. I just wanted to kind of tie a point together that Darnell and Nichol both laid out that I thought was really powerful. You talk about data and the importance of data to decision making. When our community, when CSR particularly talks about data, they always talk about metrics they want to show externally to show their impact, but rarely you hear the way Nichol framed it, which I think is the right way to do it for organizations, which is how do you take data and weave it into your decision making and how you support the community and let it drive your work. And you listen to Darnell talk about storytelling and the value of, we often lead with metrics in our work, but rarely do we tell the story, and how much more powerful it is for people to understand metrics when they hear a story behind where the metrics really come from. And I think, those two pieces are so powerful, along with the, again, the point of communication overall. When you're thinking about your work, you're doing that. And I think that pivots right into what we're talking about now, which is, as we all kind of try to kind of come back from an incredibly difficult time and make good decisions, we don't have the answers. I think it comes down to continuing with good communication, following the process, listening to the health leaders and folks that are leading out the information, and making sure you can follow, make good decisions, and making sure that you're able to pivot along the way. And that requires you to make sure that you come with an open mind and flexibility as you put together a plan. Information is changing daily, and therefore it requires really good communication. You have to meet people with where they are with that information. But internally, that's going to continue to be important. And then the storytelling piece that we just talked about with data collection, really amplifying that with all these powerful stories that are out there that our community in the sports and entertainment world can do so effectively.
Todd, I thought you were about to break some news and you were going to give us the full schedule and rundown.
I'm leaving that to Nichol. I'm leaving that to Nichol on the MLB side.
Like, when's the NBA coming back? Can you give us the full schedule? Nichol, can you tell us about when MLB is coming back? I want to know.
No breaking news. You see Todd and I trying to skirt the question here. The reality is, the players and the union and the ownership groups are working on trying to get this off the ground, and all of us obviously are sort of vehemently waiting and hoping and praying that this happens this season. I know that sports does something for society and could do something for people during this time, especially. That could be really uplifting. So hopefully that'll be the case. I think that I ditto everything that Todd just said, and I think that there's an opportunity here, though. While there is no sports, there is this open window for those of us in sports and entertainment to really show our stakeholders what we're all about. There's an opportunity here to provide a voice other than the one that people are used to us showing, and the one that most of them do see through our players, whether it's performance on a field, on a court, et cetera, or whatever our players are doing off court or off field. But the reality is, I think that we have sung a mantra at our organization that is, it's the Dodgers Foundation, bigger than baseball. That's our tagline, bigger than baseball, bigger than baseball. And I feel like right now, the opportunity for us is to show our stakeholders how we define bigger than baseball. We're doing it all the time, but it's got such a loud and visible platform at this moment. And it's true, I think, for everyone in sports and entertainment. How are you bigger than what people knew you for? How are you bigger than basketball? How are you bigger than entertainment? How are you bigger than music, bigger than the arts? And we're all able to show sort of our influence on the crisis at this time, or frankly, for a lot of people, they're struggling with their lack of influence and trying to figure out, how do I learn how to operate in this environment that is changing and flexible and adjusting every single day, so that should we be faced with a crisis moment or period in time like this once again, or year like this once again, how will we face it? But I think there's such an opportunity here to be bigger than who you were a few months ago. And I think that sports and entertainment really has an opportunity, and we can see people rising to the occasion to take advantage of that opportunity for the best interest of all of our stakeholders.
That's great. Darnell?
I was just going to add on that. Look, obviously our agency works across all of these different areas. So we represent a number of baseball players and basketball players. We're in the sports business. We're in the movie and TV business, which has seen a stoppage in production. Also, too, given that we haven't been able to gather in movie theaters. You see, movies not being released how they traditionally would. And we're very much in the music touring business, and because the summer concert period of time is where 60% of the revenue in the music business is made, and so those things have all gone away. So we're constantly like shifting and thinking from a business perspective, how can we find value now? But in the other piece is like, we've got all of these amazing artists who aren't working in the traditional sense, how they've been doing before. So how do we make sure that they have the resources and the tools to be the most impactful, effective people that they can be, given that they have these major platforms? And look, I think that a number of brands have been reaching out to our clients, and not just from an endorsement perspective, but it's how do we find like this authentic connection? Because when you have a platform, and now folks are kind of going direct to their to their fan base, you really need to engage folks in our community in order to be able to help get a message out. And so the UTA Foundation has been just such a key advisor to our clients on making sure that they have the tools and resources to be able to help, whether it be through COVID, whether it be what's going on, today around protests and making sure they're using their platforms for good and holding people accountable. It is a real opportunity, though, for us to, even though business isn't running as it usually is, how do we really focus in on making the best out of it and really arming our influential clients with the tools that they need.
Great. I want to remind just
Ken,
before you go, Todd,
okay.
I just want to remind the audience, if you have questions, feel free to submit them and we'll try to weave them in. Sorry, go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say, from a stakeholder piece, one of the things when everything happened for us, particularly on the NBA side, for those that remember, it happened actually during a game. One of our players tested positive. We had to pivot very quickly. We actually announced it on a Wednesday night. Some of you remember it. I will never forget it. I'm sure all of us in the NBA community know it. We pivoted very quickly. And I think from a stakeholder standpoint and a crisis standpoint was how quickly can we communicate out, starting with our internal stakeholders, and what can we do externally. And I know you heard from Nichol and Darnell. From our side, it was NBA Together was our response. We wanted, we looked at it in 4 ways. We wanted to get that out there very quickly. And the first thing we wanted to do and felt was really important is how do we use our platform? You hear from sports organizations, from athletes, from artists, from entertainers. How do you make sure that you are able to disseminate the right information and make sure you're pointing people towards the right resources? I think when everything started, there was a lot of miscommunication over how to stay safe and what to do. And so we got out there very quickly with PSAs. And to give you an idea of that effect, we've had about 60 million views of PSAs on our platforms, 45 million, which happened within the first 2 weeks in March. So there was a lot of hunger to find out more. And to Nicole's point, people are looking towards the sports world and others for this information. And so we had a responsibility to do that. Acts of caring, pointing people towards things big and small, empathy during this time that they can do, organizations they can support. And then, Darnell brought this up, the connectivity. How do you connect with people in a new, innovative way with stakeholders during this time? We're doing it right now, right? A virtual conference, being able to go wide. We did the same thing on our platforms. We have had more than half our players and legends participate in conversations on varying topics. We've brought in experts in the equity space. We had Mark Morial from the National Urban League, Mitch Landrieu, Valerie Jared, Brian Stevenson, others join us for conversations around the inequity of COVID-19 in Black and Hispanic communities. So we've tried to use this platform to do that. And I think we're all talking about it, but the importance of how do you look inwardly at who you are as an organization, what you bring right to the table, and how do you use those resources in a way to reach the right stakeholders and then measure them, to Nicole's point, and be able to effectively storytell around them is the other point. So, those are things that we've started to do on the NBA side so people are aware.
Nice. We're getting some questions from the audience. So just to piggyback on that, actually, I think that's a really interesting point, and then kind of piggybacks on a question we just got. Darnell, specific to you, Lorene Coleman is asking what you would recommend and suggest to nonprofit organizations that may not have the resources to pay for talent, hypothetically. Like, how can they engage influencers and talent for causes that they care about, right? For Todd and the NBA, I think they can get some of these key name folks to come in there and use their platform because of the audience and reach they have. But, how can other organizations think through and kind of get their attention?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, well, first, we don't our clients aren't being paid to, support the causes that they care about. They're doing it because that's where their passion is, and so is what they do, as a part of their service. So, and before I became an agent on the business side of things, the first couple of years when I moved to the entertainment industry, I was, an executive in the foundation of another agency. And so a big part of my day-to-day was advising our clients on connecting them with organizations that made sense for them. And what I would always tell nonprofit organizations is, there is some work you have to do on your side. I think sometimes people will just throw out, the biggest name celebrity they can think of and say, we want that person to be our ambassador. And I'm like, well, that's not the issue that they necessarily, connect with. Did you know that they have their own organization? So instead of, I think you have to think through who are the talent voices that are the most, that make the most sense and would be the most authentic connection to your message and your mission as an organization, and that already have a passion and care about that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about sharing your story with them as well. I know that all of the major agencies in the entertainment business have foundations, and a big part of what those foundations do is build relationships and partnerships with nonprofit organizations and work on behalf of our clients to help make those connections when they make sense. So the first thing I would do is engage agency foundations. Ours is the UTA Foundation, ran by Renee Jones, who started it, I think over 15 years ago. And I'm sure has worked closely with Nichol and others in the community. But a big part of it is, how do you build relationships with the nonprofit community, and then how do you understand exactly what it is that our clients are looking for from what their personal passions are, and then making those marriages and connections and doing it so it doesn't cost anyone any money.
Great. Nichol, we got a question from Cassidy Mallow. She's asking, how do we shift away when you're an institution trying to react to this, right? You're operating to accommodate the current climate, continue to support community members, in the months and years to come. But then how do you as an organization also stay focused on your kind of bottom line, on the organization itself, on the people and the planet and the profits you're trying to address regularly?
Yeah. A challenging question for me, because I got to be honest, we have been consistently on the ground, at least for the last 7 years, in the communities that are hardest hit by the current crisis. And so I think if I could flip that a little bit,
sure,
people are going to have to use this opportunity to evaluate whether they were actually consistently there and addressing these issues beforehand or not. And if not, I think there has to just be a reevaluation, right, of priorities within organizations on issues that really matter. I'm not saying that there aren't issues outside of the existing crisis, but there might be sort of this chain or priority list per se that organizations might have to shift to. I think that there's also a strategy for those who haven't been consistently in communities, who are saying, now I'm just doing the work in a deeper way, which is kind of the way that we feel, that what are you going to do when the next crisis hits? What is your strategy, right? Like, now is the time, I feel, even amidst this crisis, a lot of organizations have been given this gift of time. A lot of corporations have been given this gift of time. And hopefully folks are utilizing it to understand that there has to be sustainable strategies in place, sustainable change in place. You can't keep reacting, or this is just going to be an up and down pendulum that just doesn't make sense. And you become very apparent. It becomes very apparent to people who's doing that and who is reacting and who doesn't understand that we can't be shifting and saying, oh my gosh, there's a hurricane. Let's now go figure out what to do with the hurricane. Oh my God, there's an earthquake. Let's figure out what to do with the earthquake. It's really, what is your strategic crisis plan? Who are going to be your partners when something happens that you're going to call on to say, hey, let's tackle this issue together? And what are the things that you're going to consistently be doing in the ground, in the communities that you serve, to be able to show that we care about these issues all the time, or that we'll be ready to serve and to support these issues should they arise in big fashion in the future.
So let's just drill down real quick about your immediate kind of, first couple of weeks when everything started happening, right? Like it appears that you and the Dodgers Foundation were very intentional, right? Like you very specifically tried to address something that was already mission aligned in terms of your response to COVID. Walk us through that. Like how did that come up?
Yeah, you know what, for us, we immediately launched an emergency fund because we knew that it was important to engage the fans. It was important to engage players and others who wanted to support. So we wanted to provide a central point where people could contribute monetarily. But we also gathered our team partners, our media partner, iHeartRadio, and basically the Dodgers and the Dodgers Foundation said, hey, let's come together and pull together everybody we know wants to help, and we know who is mission aligned on helping this community right now, and focus specifically on those who are experiencing food insecurity, those who are experiencing homelessness, those who just don't have basic needs at this very moment.
Yeah.
The homeless population, which is just, so significant here, regardless of any crisis, and outside of any crisis. And then also really focusing in on the healthcare workers. Obviously, I think the extra spark for us this moment was the frontline workers and how they were exposed to the virus and how they needed the support, whether it just be the motivation or the PPE supplies or otherwise. And so I think that coming together to provide in-kind donations, so donations of food and hygiene necessities and towels and things of that nature. But for us, it was look at existing relationships. So we build baseball fields in underserved communities here in the Los Angeles community, and we have a youth development program that's rooted in baseball and softball for about 11,000 youth and families. And the reality is we work very closely with our city rec and parks departments and our county park and recs departments. A lot of those locations became homeless shelters. And so we immediately worked with them to provide food and basic necessities for the child care that was happening there, because families who were working were able to provide a child care facility on the same site, but also for the homeless population, towels. We just went into inventory. We found promo towels that we would have given out at games. We reached out to partners who had towels, and we said, hey, it's a really good idea right now. This is something that they expressed that they need. We need to provide this. We looked specifically at, as we've all talked about, the disparities of the Black community and how hard the virus was hitting the Black community. And we went to Watts and we said, hey, we're going to partner with a team sponsor, and we're going to make sure that we are able to buy food and groceries during those healthcare, hours during the morning for individuals and families who just can't afford to buy groceries at this moment. So I think that, really honing in on the specific needs in the community and grabbing partners immediately was something that we were doing. We used the monetary donations for like the LA Food Bank and My Friend's Place, and to support the Mayor's Fund and others that we know were doing work that was aligned with where we wanted to be.
Nice. And then Todd, walk us through the NBA's thinking, right? I mean, you obviously domestically have a huge profile, visibility, et cetera, but obviously over the last 20 years, the NBA's kind of visibility internationally has skyrocketed. I mean, have you thought about it in two different buckets? Do you approach it the same way? I mean, how are you thinking about this?
Well, you can't be prescriptive when you're going locally, right? And so for us, it starts with, this has to be a core business pillar. Why are you doing this? Is it a part of who you are? When you're responding and you're talking about stakeholders, particularly in our business, there are a lot of stakeholders in our world, and there's a lot of people that manage those stakeholder relationships. And so understanding philosophically as an organization what our values are, what we stand for, and how we respond is incredibly important to responding globally, because the communication is going to be different, but the philosophy needs to remain the same, so there's consistency among the organization. And so when everything happened around COVID, as an example, when we launched NBA Together, this wasn't a social responsibility initiative. This was an NBA initiative. We had every department is represented. Every department is communicating externally to their stakeholders. So, for example, if our arena operations group is looking to pivot arenas into blood centers to collect much needed blood, which I know the American Red Cross needed, or food distribution centers, or additional hospital beds, depending on the city, they have to be able to have those conversations. And the experts in that space in terms of our operations need to make sure they're working with the stakeholders to do that. But it starts with the philosophy that that's what we're going to do as an organization, and we're going to lead with those values. And so when you're talking about operating globally, it needs to start with, you need to start and build that foundation. Nichol mentioned this, and it's a point I make as well, which is crisis breeds innovation, but crisis is not a time to start something new. You have to prepare for these things prior. You need to have the foundation. You need to have those processes in place, or else you're not able to kind of make the strategic decisions needed to make sure you can reach those stakeholders, you're doing the right things, and that you can adjust as you go, but at least you have a foundation to build off. And I think for organizations now, if you're reactive, usually you overcorrect, you do things that you're not prepared to do. So it's incredibly important for organizations to all take this as a time. How is this not a nice thing to do, but how is it part of my philosophy as a business? How is it a core business pillar? Because that then leads to, when we communicate to stakeholders, regardless of what you do operationally in our business globally, we're all philosophically approaching the same way, and we can make sure we have a similar strategy.
So Darnell, how do you kind of maintain a level of engagement and relationship building and partnership building over a long period of time, right? Like, do you kind of reflect back on your political days like a campaign, right? I mean, is this kind of like a sustained thing where you have to kind of message out a plan and kind of strategically, map out for like months in the year to come? I mean, how do you advise kind of, talent and companies that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, well, first is you have to prioritize these issues, right? You've got to make a long-term commitment. What I've been telling a lot of clients, what I've been telling just a lot of friends or people who've been reaching out who are thinking through like, well, how do we, specifically talking about what's been going on with police brutality and all the kind of racial injustice in the country right now. Not right now, it's been going on forever, but in this current moment that we're in, there's been a lot of this like, well, what can I do? What can I do right now? I donated, I posted, what else can I do? And I said, look, there isn't a silver bullet solution that's going to change this overnight. And I think the reason why it's taken so long for really any real major progress to happen is because we haven't had a long-term commitment, a prioritization, and a care from, basically like the white community to, make sure that they're doing everything they can to not only be not racist themselves, but to tear down every racist structure systematically that exists, whether that be within their companies, whether that be within their friend groups, whether that be within society in general. And so the best thing that you can do right now, if you've read the books that people have recommended to you, and if you've posted all that you've posted and you've donated to your favorite organizations, is make a lifelong commitment to this work, and do your part in order to prioritize this. And that means by every person that you vote for, everything that you support, it has to be within your consciousness, because and who knows, in a couple of weeks, the way this year's going, who knows where the news cycle is going to be. And, and folks are going to be like, on to the next thing. But I want them to remember what it felt like in this moment, and want them to kind of continue and stick with it. So that's the advice that we've been giving our colleagues. It's our advice we've been giving our clients, and, any corporation or brand that has reached out, it's the same type of thing. This is a long-term commitment, and what are you going to do?
So Tina's asking a question here that I think maybe builds on this. She's reflecting on President Obama's remarks yesterday, right? He specifically and intentionally said that Black Lives Matter, right? And she's kind of asking, do we pass the time and do we build kind of a foundation now where instead of it being more of a question like, do Black Lives Matter? It's a statement, right? Black Lives Matter. Like, how do we build and grow in terms of like stakeholder engagement and kind of like, set a foundation and kind of grow from there?
I mean,
does that change the approach just in general, right? Like if we can move it from being a question to a statement, like how do we change the conversation a little bit into something that's more
Look,
progressive?
I'm glad that there are so many people now who are, agreeing that Black Lives Matter. When this movement started a number of years ago, I think around the time of in Ferguson, and a little bit before that, there was still debate. Well, it's like, there was the All Lives Matter movement. And it's like, great, we all agree that all lives matter, but there's a very specific group of people who are being brutalized, who are being killed on the streets by police and otherwise, that no one seems to care about. So we need to focus some attention on that. So it was never a question for that movement. It's always been a statement. And at the very basic root of that, it's like acknowledge the existence of, of the fact that Black life is being taken away, and a lot of people aren't necessarily caring about it. So if we're on the same page now, where do we go from here? I think it's similar to what I just said, which is like continuing to commit to this. And Black lives don't only matter when it comes to being, to police brutality. Black lives matter when it comes to housing. Black lives matter when it comes to socioeconomic opportunities. Black lives matter when it comes to education. Black lives matter when it comes to opportunities within corporations and advancement. If you change all of those things, that's the system that we've been talking about, the systematic change that we need. We need Black lives to matter across all of those things. If not, we're going to be way behind, and there is no way that we catch up and we're all on equal footing.
Mm-hmm.
If I could ask that as well, I feel that Black Lives Matter moves from a question to a statement when more people actually are willing to say, frankly, flat out say Black Lives Matter and flat out breathe daily Black Lives Matter. And by that I mean, you would be amazed how during this time frame, and Darnell hit it on the head, right? There are still folks who are resisting the language, Black Lives Matter, period. Not question mark, not do they matter, not let's go investigate and research do they matter. Let's get back to you and let you know if we think they matter. Black Lives Matter, period. It's 3 words, it's a sentence, you put a period on it, you say it, you don't be afraid to say it, whether you're an individual, a corporation, an institution, a nonprofit organization, whatever it is. I'm struggling with the fact that there are a lot of people who are still not okay saying it today on day 1. We're on the Memorial Day for George Floyd. We're talking about this happened last week Monday. We're talking about the fact that our world is under fire. Our country's under fire right now with protests and people who are just frustrated and angry. And we still have folks who just won't literally say Black Lives Matter or Black community. The Black community, ironically, will stand with the LGBT community, will stand with the Latino community, will stand behind all. Black Lives Matter has actually supported that initiative has supported so many of these others who feel that they've been marginalized populations at one point or another or ongoing as well. And so I think that saying Black Lives Matter is so important. And when I say breathe Black Lives Matter, for me, it's that companies, organizations, individuals, nonprofit organizations, et cetera, it's got to be part of what you do. And I think we've all said that, but it's got to be part of what you do. It can't be, oh, today I'm going to say it, and tomorrow my actions are going to speak differently. Yeah. Or I don't have a program institutionalized that supports that. Or I don't have an individual internally that helps the organization push that forward. Or I don't really care because I'm not really recruiting or being reflective of that within my organization, or I'm not putting forth talent, or I'm not putting forth. It means we have to breathe it, right? And I think that's the problem, is that right now the country's under fire because people are tired of folks pretending Black Lives Matter when the actions have obviously historically shown that people don't feel that way. So say it, let's say it, and let's breathe it. I think that's what's most important, and that's what moves it from a question to a period. And I think the sad part is that for many, it's still a question.
And Ken, I'll just jump in. I mean, the other piece here is privilege, particularly white privilege. Yeah. And it is a, when you see what happened to George Floyd and the atrocity in the video, it's easy to condemn that. It's much harder to reflect internally on understanding the system, even which we've all grown up in, learned in, and how do you systematically look at your unconscious bias and work to change it with difficult conversations and listening and learning. And Darnell brought up the white community. 100%. It's you don't know. I don't know what some of my colleagues go through on a day-to-day basis, and the subtle situations they've dealt with of racism and feeling less than, and that recognition of privilege, of being in that position and understanding and learning to listen and turning that light on yourself and having that hard reflection is not something you can just do now. It is a lifelong commitment to making sure that you continue to look to be a part of that solution. And that's hard. That's hard for all of us, but certainly, we all collectively need to do it. But that privilege piece is a critical component here when we're having this dialogue.
So as we kind of look ahead, right, we're dealing with a lot in every community as across this nation, around the world. What potential silver lining do you see through this moment in time? I mean, what do you think that you hope kind of comes out of this before, the things, the protests in the street calm down, before vaccine comes, we kind of get back to our normal lives, right? What do you hope kind of is achieved or comes out of this that everyone can kind of reflect and build upon? That'll hopefully make us all stronger collectively. Or is there no silver lining in work?
Yeah, I feel like this is an interesting moment in time that is impacting everybody. Mm-hmm. So I think that as we think about the economic impacts, the mental impacts, the social impact of COVID-19 and of the ugly system of racism, the silver lining is that, one, people have had enough. Mm-hmm. And not just the Black community and not just those hit by the virus. People have had enough. 2020 has been enough. And so I do think that the silver lining is that the conversations are happening because people have had enough. And there are conversations, a lot that have not been had before. And I think my hope is that we use the conversations appropriately to create some positive, sustainable change in the communities that we know are most vulnerable and most at risk in this country.
I think, the silver lining that I hope comes out of this, is I used to work in politics, obviously. So anytime there's major crisis, I always think to how can political change and policy change, help lay the foundation to us really growing and moving out of this. And so, the silver lining I hope comes out of this is, one, people understand the importance and the power of the presidency. And, when you have a force for good in that role, it can bring people together. It can respond to crises faster, like global pandemics. It could, calm issues around racial injustice and bring people together instead of fanning the flames. Long over, I hope, are the days of like, it doesn't matter if I vote. It is what it doesn't really matter. What's the difference? I think we've seen the difference. We've seen the worst of the worst. And so I'm hoping that I love the peaceful protesting energy that you're seeing on the streets. People are tired and they're fed up. I hope that every single person who is out there is registered to vote and they want to bring that same energy in November, and not only make change on the presidential level, but understanding that if you've got issues with police brutality and you want to know why it takes so long, if it happens at all, for police officers to get charged, you need to be voting for your DA. If you want to be, and making sure that the mayors that you're voting for, believe in the same agenda that you do, and how do we put policies in place that, stop what's happening with police officers. I think voting is so fundamental, and sometimes it seems like a throwaway to people where it's like, oh, just go vote. But it is so fundamental, important to where we are today. And the more people are engaged, then I think you're going to see a lot of change. I think we saw it after the Women's March, which led into, more women being elected into Congress and also on the state and local levels than ever in history before. I hope we're seeing that same type of wave with this movement for November up and down the ballot, because there needs to be a complete repudiation of what's been going on over these last few years.
I would just say the energy I've seen in the last week particularly is not from multiple voices that I haven't heard from or seen before. I see it. There's more people coming forward, people that have traditionally not used their voice to do this, and they're feeling that anger and they're feeling that frustration, and they want to learn, they want to get engaged. I hope we can channel this energy and this protest into action. I think voting is definitely first and foremost on the list. Vote, register to vote, know how important at a baseline, that is your entry point. But certainly understand that this work is not now, this work is long-term, and we need to continue to invest in that. And, my hope is that the silver lining is that this energy is new, that there's more people engaged, and that we can continue to channel that energy into long-term engagement and action, because that's what's needed. And I think the Women's March is a perfect example that if it can result in more leadership, and ways in which we can hear more voices out there to kind of the decisions we make, it'll help. And it's for us as organizations and as community leaders, how do we channel that energy into the work we're doing, reevaluating it to make sure that it can continue and people are committed to it. So, that's the hope, is that this energy that is newfound and certainly a lot more, I think, than we've all seen, and it's great. And we can continue to feel that 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, that we're really kind of seeing that change implemented into action.
Look, I'm very grateful to the Social Innovation Summit for continuing and moving this virtually and making this happen, for putting together such a great topic, and to all of you, not only for being on this panel, but I think another silver lining is this really kind of been an opportunity for each of you to really step to the forefront in your respective sectors with your clients, with the work you're doing, and I think putting a spotlight on it. So kudos to you, and I think everything that all three of you are doing on a daily basis is incredible, and hopefully it's getting even more attention than maybe it normally would have. So, grateful for your participation and wonderful seeing all of you. Thanks to SIS and to everyone who's tuning in.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Great to see you. Thank you.